Hello everyone, it's me, your average bonehead, Jay. And I just got done watching Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender. And my thoughts are... Look, it's not the worst thing ever. Unlike the movie, it didn't make me crave the sweet embrace of the end. But I believe it's far from being considered even good. Let me explain. Oh, and spoiler warning ahead. One thing you need to know is that the original Avatar: The Last Airbender series is my second favorite show of all time. Yeah, I hold it in such high regard, and it has a very, very special place in my heart. So already a live-action remake of a beloved property in a sea of uninspired live-action remakes of beloved properties means this series already had an uphill battle it had to fight to justify itself, and well... Let's start with the positives. First of all, this show looks great. Like the cities, the creature designs, and even the costumes all look good sometimes. I like how most of the actors actually do visually resemble their animated counterparts, unlike the other movie. And while we're comparing to the movie, one little thing is I actually love how the Fire Nation looks compared to how it did in the movie. In the movie, I find things to be way too bright, while in the Netflix series, everything has the perfect shade and color that it needs. My favorite part for looks is when Zhao kills the moon spirit, and much like in the animated series, everything goes monochrome and the only source of color comes from the fire bending. It just looks so good. The action is not bad. Most, emphasis on most, of the fight scenes are really fast-paced and snappy, like any good action should be. There are a few that aren't, but most of them are okay. As a die-hard fan of the show, I of course have to applaud them for having this. My commentary! And ironically, much like the movie, the best parts of it are Zuko and Iroh. They are almost just as good as they are in the original. I really do buy the relationship that these two have, as I feel like these are kind of hard characters to really mess up. In fact, one of my favorite scenes in the entire show is a scene where we see Zuko getting ready to leave after he was banished, and we see Iroh tag along. The acting and emotion there is so believable, and it's one of the things that they added that I really, really like. It's moments like these that do make me think, okay, they did care a little bit. Emphasis on a little bit, because now I've run out of positives, and now it's time to start complaining. Oh boy, here we go. You know, despite trying to right the wrongs of the movie, this show ironically falls into many of the same pitfalls that it did. Pitfall number 1, it speedruns through the plot of season 1, yet for some reason it still feels slow and dragged out. This show's versions of the episodes The Warriors of Kyoshi and The Waterbending Master are just those episodes, but longer, yet it feels like less happens in them. In the original Waterbending Master, it was about Katara proving wrong the sexist ideologies of the Northern Water Tribe, and showing that just because she's a girl, it doesn't mean she can't be out there fighting to help the innocent. This leads to her having an epic one-on-one battle with the Master, and even though she ends up losing the fight, she still proves him wrong, and he and the Northern Water Tribe end up learning their lesson. In this version though, despite the episode being longer, not only is the battle the same amount of time, but it feels like it takes longer to get to this point. And yeah, I know technically speaking it literally does, but at the same time, nothing of major value is in there to fill said time. It's just them going through the motions, but much slower. Hell, the guy doesn't even learn his lesson at the ending of this story, because it's not till the next episode where he learns that just because she's a woman, it doesn't mean she can't fight. Then what was the point of that? It just wastes our time. As for its version of the Warriors of Kyoshi, it's the same basic idea of what happened in that episode, except with less things in it. Pitfall number 2, it combines a bunch of episodes together, making the whole series a tonal nightmare and missing the point of some episodes. This builds off the last point, but their time in Omashu is split up into 2 episodes, and for part 1 of their time in Omashu, it combines the episodes Jet and the Northern Air Temple together. This misses the point of both of those stories by putting them into Omashu. For one, I know Jet is kinda cuckoo, but I don't think he'd do an over-the-top assassination attempt on someone he thinks is Fire Nation while he's in front of the king of Omashu. And 2, the whole point of the Northern Air Temple was for Aang to be upset that other people had invaded this sacred place, but learning it's okay for people with nothing to make once abandoned places their new home. And during the second part of their time in Omashu, it ends up combining Aang dealing with Bumi with the Cave of Two Lovers, and having Katara and Sokka do that? What? It also kind of just spoils the badger moles, which I thought was meant to be foreshadowing to Toph, but oh well. The combining plots isn't just for Omashu though, as when they were dealing with the winter solstice, it for some reason has the season 2 episode The Swamp, which also existed mainly to foreshadow Toph, and also combined that with the episode The Blue Spirit. Yeah, those 2 episodes during the events of the winter solstice, which ends up taking away from the first part of this two-parter's message, being that just because something was destroyed doesn't mean it's the end of it forever. That ending part where Aang tells that to the spirit just feels tacked on in this version, because everything's being so rushed, yet at the same time so slow. Pitfall number 3, missing plots. Certain episodes and characters are just completely omitted from this version. The main ones that came to mind was The Deserter and Imprisoned. Yes, Imprisoned, the episode where we learned how small Earth Kingdom towns are suffering during this war, and where Katara steps up to give the Earthbenders of this village the hope and inspiration that they need, is completely removed. I mean, even the movie adapted this episode. Though on second thought, maybe it was a good thing they skipped it. But The Deserter, the episode where we learned that not everyone in the Fire Nation are mindless drones, where we learn about Aang's impatience, where we learn about his ability to firebend, and why he ends up becoming scared of it, where we learn that Katara can heal, all gone. And the fourth pitfall that the movie made that this series runs into, and the most egregious in my eyes, most of the dialogue is just explaining things rather than us seeing these things. There are so many long-winded exposition dumps throughout this show, and I just don't care. If you're going to take so much time explaining this stuff, show it to me. You can use flashbacks. Do it. Don't just have the characters awkwardly standing there telling me these things. You're a visual medium. Be visual. Now for the problems unique to this series. Some things just feel like they're happening way too early. Like, I've already mentioned the season 2 episodes that already happened for some reason, but on top of that, they show off Ozai's face already, and I think it kind of takes away from the suspense. Like, yeah, I know we know his actor, but still, it would have been cool for the show. They also show off Azula a lot throughout season 1, and it feels like they're doing the ending of her character arc already for some reason. Also, because Azula is in season 1 and hasn't left on her mission yet, that means Mei and Ty Lee literally have nothing to do, and anyone who isn't in the know of who these characters are will be wondering why they're just standing around awkwardly. I also hate how Avatar Kyoshi is portrayed in this series. Yes, we all like to laugh at the trigger-happy Kyoshi memes, but when you really think about it, all she was saying to Aang in the show was that she took action and did what she felt had to be done because she couldn't foresee any other way of it being resolved. She isn't just kill the guy. And on top of that, she kind of ends up taking Roku's whole thing of showing up once to help out Aang, which means Roku kind of serves no purpose in this series, even though the whole point of Avatar Roku was to show a different side of the Fire Nation and that connection that Aang had to our main antagonists. As well as, to tell Aang about Sozin's comet, which Aang doesn't know about yet. And on top of that, I just find Roku's whole erupting an island volcano to destroy the temple and scare everyone off just to be more ethereal and overall cool looking than Kyoshi just showing up and beating up a bunch of guys. But speaking of Kyoshi and Roku, and how they were ruined, aside from Zuko and Iroh, the characters in this range from missing a part of their personality to missing the point of their character. Aang is almost always serious and melodramatic about his role as the Avatar. They say he has his fun-loving side there, but they never really show it. Katara's motherly side, as well as her short-tempered outbursts, are basically all gone, and the relationship between her and Aang is just as visible. Sokka is a weird one, because it seems like his arc is still kinda there, but they remove the first major part of it, and that's the part where he learned to stop being a sexist prick. When we say we wanted to see Sokka's sexism, it's not because we like seeing a character be like that, it's because we like seeing a character who has that terrible trait get it knocked out of them and they become humble. With the first part of Sokka's arc gone, he kinda doesn't have much to do in season 1. In fact, if anything, in the episode with the Kyoshi warriors, it's Suki who has to learn something. Yeah, for some reason Suki is the one they decide to make more uptight and needing to learn to be open. That kinda defeats the whole purpose of Sokka's entire plot in that episode, and the episode in general, but okay. Granted, unlike Aang and Katara, I actually do buy Sokka and Suki's relationship. I still find it to be sweet, but it's still kind of head scratching that they basically reversed the two of who needs to learn the lesson. Speaking of characters they kind of missed the point of, King Boomy. This is not Boomy. All he does in this is complain to Aang about how horrible the war is and how Aang wasn't there for them. Even though Aang wouldn't have been able to do anything even if he was there, but that's besides the point. The whole point of Boomy's entire character in the original was to teach Aang how to think outside of the box and come up with solutions to problems that some wouldn't even realize were present. Which, when you think about it, does kind of foreshadow how Aang ultimately defeats Ozai. But in this, all of that is stripped away and it's just more people telling Aang that he wasn't there for them. That is such a gross mischaracterization of how Boomy should act, to the point that it actually kind of ruins the show for me. I don't care how realistic it is that Boomy would be upset about this stuff and the pressure of being a king for the last 100 years would get to him, but this is Boomy we're talking about. There were other characters that could have done this, but they chose Boomy? No, that's not Boomy. I don't care, that's not him. Then there's our big bad guys. I already said that I'm not a big fan of Ozai being seen this early, but on top of that, they do one more insane thing with him that doesn't make any sense, and that's when we see Ozai give Zuko his scar, he looks remorseful for doing so. I shouldn't have to explain why that doesn't work for Ozai. And then after that, there's Azula. Look, aside from the fact that we're seeing her way too early and her, May, and Ty Lee have basically nothing to do during season 1, I don't think any fan will disagree that no duh, Azula was also abused by Ozai, obviously in a different way from Zuko, but still. But the problem is they're showing her cracks way too early. The whole point of Azula throughout the whole series was that she was this damn near unstoppable force, but when May and Ty Lee betrayed her and she ended up having basically no one left, that's when the cracks started to show and she became more and more unstable until she finally broke down. I feel like showing the cracks here kind of takes away from the impact of when it will inevitably happen later. And then finally that leaves Zhao. I don't know why they made him such a cartoonish bad guy in this series. I can't take him seriously as a threat, even if he managed to kill the moon. Now moving up, oh wait, I forgot Appa and Momo, like the show constantly does. But besides all of that, my main problem with this series is that it doesn't justify its existence. There is no point to this thing existing. If the idea was to make the original series more real and adult, then they failed miserably because 1, can we stop pretending that animation is for kids? Animation geared to a more younger audience can still be very mature and even sometimes more believable than live action. Plus, most of this live action show is animated. Majority of everything that happens is CGI. So it becomes even less believable than if it were to all be animation, because when you're watching something animated, you don't have to be convinced it's real, where in live action, seeing something that's CGI and clearly not there takes you out of the immersion. That is the endless advantage of animation and disadvantage of live action. And 2, if it wants to be more adult, then why does it longly explain everything, leaving the audience with nothing to think about? This show actively plays down to people. Case in point, the Blue Spirit. They literally have a scene beforehand of Zuko asking where this prison is, yet they still play the Blue Spirit as a mystery of who it is behind the mask, like they didn't already set up that it's obviously gonna be Zuko. And then after he breaks Aang out, they have a long conversation of the two of them basically just telling Aang why he's doing all this. So it leaves nothing to the imagination, nothing for you to think about, and no reason to come back to this episode. And it just removes a good portion of Zuko and Aang's development from enemies to friends. Overall, this show is definitely better than the movie for what it gets right, but I can't in good faith say it's a good adaptation for what it gets wrong, because when it gets those things wrong, it gets them extremely wrong. And because of the source material, I can't even call it a good show on its own. However, if you like it, fine. Don't let me be the one to take that away from you. But honestly, if you were to ask me which Avatar you should watch, I would say watch the animated one, or as I call it, the only Avatar, The Last Airbender. And then after that, go watch Legend of Korra. It's a good series, goddammit. Now, I'm your average bonehead Jay, and I wish you all good night. Oh, you're still here. Well, since you stuck around for this long, you might as well like and subscribe, comment if you're feeling really daring. And while you're at it, you might as well follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jayskeletyn. Links down below. And if you just want to see more, you can check out the playlists or look at my last video. Now thanks for watching, and if you need me, I'm going back to bed